Welcome to another episode of What to Say and How to Say It. Today, we're going to be talking about 3 reasons you can't be realistic with your spouse. That is probably going to hit a chord for some of you. I know that it's a big deal. I'm with Kyle Hargrove, our favorite licensed professional counselor, and this is a common thing we see in relationships, whether it's coaching or therapy. And we want to talk about this because if you don't navigate this well, then your relationship is got like a time limit. That thing is going to implode. You got to figure out how to navigate being realistic with your spouse, even if it's scary. And if you don't, you're going to regret it later because this is one of the most common things that people deal with. And if you want more information about how to, navigate relationships, be sure to pop over to our website, greaterimpactcouples.org, and pick up our free little PDF that'll help you find your voice and stop walking on eggshells. But let's talk about this. I was thinking about I got a text today from like I don't even know who it's from. I sign up for stuff sometimes online and you got to give them your phone number, right?
Never happened to me.
Oh,
Mm-mm.
come on. Yeah. So, but I get this text and it it says something like, "Are you ready to move forward?" Question mark, question mark, then dot dot dot, and then a smiley face. And I'm like, I don't know who this is from. This is not my contacts. And I don't know what this is about. Like, what is this? And so I send back a question mark and I get this thing about you signed up for so and so, blah, 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 for da 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 da. And I think it was dog training or something. And I went, okay. Yeah. And then I type in stop, right?
Right. Just in
But it
case they
occurred to
actually will.
me, yeah, you and I both have people that do this like crazy thing where they dig into their spouse's phone, right? And then they look for hurt and then they start spiraling because you can find just about anything on anybody's phone these days based on, marketing. Like I'm sure you see that in your practice occasionally,
On
daily.
occasion, I would
Yeah.
say that as many, if not more, of significant marital struggles in 2024 occur when one spouse or the other finds information on the other's devices
Yeah.
that they don't understand, that they don't recognize, or that they feel for whatever the reason is inappropriate with someone they shouldn't, with an inappropriate person, inappropriate behaviors with inappropriate people.
Yeah.
And that list is fairly solid, I think, for most of us, but for specific situations, those lists are different.
I'm thankful that my husband trusts me. Like I leave my phone laying all over the place and I don't even know where it is half the time. And he never goes through it. And if he did, like he'd go on my Facebook. I get messages from strange men. Well, I don't know if they're strange. They're just strangers that, are and they're saying things like, "Oh, you're so da, da, da," and I can tell by the way that you write that, and I'm like, "Oh my gosh, decline, decline, like stop sending me friend requests. I
Right.
don't know you." But that happens, and I can totally like I've had clients that have dug into their spouse's phone, found this kind of thing in their social media, and then accused their spouse of infidelity when the spouse legitimately doesn't even know who this person is. Like that's real life. What's going on there? Like, what's this about?
There are 100 things it could be about. Um, let's do one thing. Let's cut through the veil just from the beginning. And when we talked about when you can't be realistic with your spouse,
Yeah, yeah.
let's do two things. Number one, it's can't, because we want to put that in air quotes for those of you that aren't watching, so that you understand it's not that we can't, it's that we don't or won't.
Oh, yes.
Okay. And then the other part is the word realistic, because what this turns into or morphs itself into is I feel like I can't be realistic with my spouse.
Hmm.
And the next thing I know, I know that I am lying to my spouse.
Oof.
And it's
Yes.
not what I intended. It's not where I started. And I feel like I'm justified.
Hmm.
in not telling the truth. And that's a problem.
Yeah.
Okay. Now we
Ugh.
all are going to, everybody on the planet can come up with an example. This is an example where it's okay to not tell the truth or where it's the best thing. Or, okay, we're not talking about that.
Hmm.
We're talking about a habit, a pattern of behavior that gets set because of a few things that we're going to chat about here this afternoon. But no, it is the struggle is real
Hmm.
in this one. And uh, we all get things. I get the exact same messages that you're telling me about, only instead of from Fred, it's from Frida. So,
Yeah.
uh, anybody that is on social media knows that that happens. But when you're looking for someone to victimize you, when you're looking to be the person on the other end of that scenario, everything's going to look like it.
Oh my word. Yes, that negative sentiment override. It's like it doesn't matter what you say, it's the wrong thing. It's like, good morning. What's good about it?
Yes.
You're always so happy as if that's a problem. Yeah.
Yeah. And
Brutal
it can
stuff.
take otherwise intelligent, well-spoken, normal, emotionally stable people and turn them into crazy people.
Hmm.
And I don't care if their parents had them tested. What they're doing now is not normal. It's not okay.
Yeah.
And it certainly is not uplifting to this marriage or to this
Hmm.
relationship.
Yeah. Brutal stuff. So, what are some reasons that we, quote, can't be realistic with our spouse?
Well, I happen to have a few.
I figured you would.
The first one that I'd like for us to discuss and throw out there is that we have an innate desire to not disappoint our spouse. We want them to be happy with us. We want to be happy. We want them to be happy with our choices and our decisions and whatever things happen and so forth. So um, we don't want to disappoint. The second one is we have a past with our spouse, and we've been through situations before that are similar. And needless to say, it didn't go well. And we don't want to repeat that. We don't want to, sequel.
Hmm. Yeah.
Because the theme is going to be the same as
Yeah.
most sequels are. So we know what will happen because of our past experiences. And then if you're like me, you've been taught whatever you do, make sure it doesn't upset your spouse.
Hmm.
Because down here in the South, many people have this posted on their in their kitchen or somewhere. If mama ain't happy, ain't nobody happy.
Yeah. Happy wife, happy life.
There you go. It's
Yeah. Sorry,
just
no.
a cultural difference in saying the same thing.
Yeah.
So we don't want to upset our spouses. We know that there are consequences for that, whether we deserve it or not. So let's go back to that first one, though.
Yeah. Yeah.
We don't want to
Disappointment.
disappoint. And I will speak from the standpoint of a man that the most difficult conversation I can recall off the top of my head, and it's not like I've been thinking about it for days, but was to have to tell my spouse that I was no longer employed.
Mm.
And it's not just that the fact that I wasn't employed and earning
Hmm.
as a very young person was going to be disappointing because it was.
Yeah.
But regardless of the circumstances, my fear was that she would be disappointed in me
Hmm.
and that she would see me as someone incapable of having and or holding that job.
Yeah.
And so it might or might not have been a couple of days before I informed my spouse of that some decades ago.
Hmm.
But I am aware of, from personal experience as a therapist, numerous individuals, mostly males, who've lost their jobs, get up in the morning, shower, grab their briefcase, get dressed, and leave the house as if they're going to work for weeks.
Yeah.
while they're not going to work. They don't have a job,
Yep.
but they cannot bring themselves to tell their spouses, their wives, that they've been released, let go, fired, whatever the case might be.
Yeah. I have a really good friend whose husband, we don't really know what happened with him a few times career wise because he'd just come home and say, well, I've left this company. I'm working for this one now. And she was always pretty confused by that. But he did that. Like he just kept acting like things were status quo.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And can't you imagine she must be thinking something along the lines of, is that not something we might have wanted to discuss together
Yeah. Hello.
at at an earlier point than now?
Yeah.
Because that's stuff most couples do talk about when there's going to
Hmm.
be a transition or a change like that.
Yeah. Yeah. For real. Yeah. I love the closeness that complaining about work brings to a relationship. Unless you're in a
Oh,
family business,
yeah.
right? Yeah. It's just like I remember watching my dad unload on my mom a few times about one of the stressful people he was co-owner with, yeah, decades ago, right? Like, and my dad's not even on the planet anymore, and neither is this guy, but she was really good at just listening. She'd just let him do his thing and say the things and say what he wished he would have said, and all that. And I thought it was the strangest thing ever because I'd walk through the kitchen and that conversation would just go on and on for like 20 minutes. Like, no joke. He could just carry the whole thing and be livid for that long. And she just sat there and let him do his thing. And I thought that was great. It's a wonderful skill to have, by the way, if you're a
It
wife,
is.
not take your husband's work angst personally. Because it ain't about you, number one. Number two, he needs to vent that somewhere. So, go out in the garage and break stuff with him. Get a sledgehammer, break up that cement floor in the bathroom that you need
Yeah.
to replace, whatever it is. But yeah, so when we think about not disappointing our spouse, like there's a healthy, I want to be there for you. I want to, there's a healthy piece of that. And then at some point, like the dude you're talking about, and some other people that I'm thinking of, someplace it slides into some kind of unhealthy, like over stress about not disappointing somebody, like almost like an enmeshment, or like I'm not using the right words with that. You know what I'm talking about though? Where we're too concerned about
Yeah,
it.
I think but that probably is gonna be the result of the stress and the pressure that that person is feeling about whatever happened or didn't happen. About you know, there are different ways maybe I could have handled that would have caused this not to happen. There are, maybe my spouse would have been the perfect person to throw this out in front of. They might have had something to say about it that changed the entire trajectory
Mhm.
in a helping way, but I took that chance away from them.
Mhm.
And so it becomes it's a trajectory change in the relationship is what it is.
Mhm.
It can actually have one that's pointed in a fairly positive direction, and it can turn it away from that just the slightest little bit. But every little bit away from where we want to be is work we have to do to get back there.
Yep. Yeah.
And it's, to say that we're ready to do the work to get back there when we're still lying is probably an untrue statement because
Mhm.
we have humility to gain first and reality to recognize
Uh,
and transparency to be aware of and to be willing to have.
mhm. Yeah, and I've found for myself, and this is actually some of the advice I give people, when you're in that space where you don't want to disappoint, like say that. I don't want to disappoint you with this. I want to talk about it, but I need you to be on my side.
Yeah.
I need you to agree with me that these people are terrible. And just I feel awful and I'm worried that I'm letting you down.
Yeah. Or in
And
other situations to say, here is my greatest fear right now. And
yeah.
to be vulnerable enough to say, this is what I'm afraid of. I'm
Hmm.
scared.
Yeah.
I don't know the outcome. I don't know several things about this. I don't know what it's going to look like, feel like, taste like, or smell like.
Hmm.
And to know that you are going to have to be a part of that is one of my greatest fears. I do
Hmm.
not want to hurt you or to bring pain into your life.
Yeah.
And
I
so
love, go
go
ahead.
ahead.
Sorry.
No, just so that desire to not cause problems or not be the source of a problem
Hmm.
can lead us to make choices that end up going deeper and further away from the truth.
Yeah, that's so true. Yeah, I love Brene Brown's the story I'm telling myself is like that phrase. Such a powerful thing because you can apply that in so many situations.
Mm-hmm.
You know, the story I'm telling myself is that I'm going to tell you this thing that happened that's horrible, and you're going to think it's all my fault, and I'm going to feel worse than I do right now.
Yeah, and that plays into some of the automatic negative thoughts of Dr. Daniel
Yeah.
Amen. Who talks about the mind reading
Hmm.
and the fortune telling, and
Yep.
that's our negative thoughts are predicting the future and what someone else is going to say or do or how they're going to
Mhm.
feel about it. Well, we never gave them that chance if we don't tell them the truth.
Yeah. Yeah.
So,
And you have to have some level of vulnerability and trust in the relationship to be even to tell the story of what you're really afraid of. Because if you're talking about the other person, right? It's one thing to say, I'm worried that I'll be thought less of or that I'll be, you know, not feeling good at the end of this conversation. And another thing to say, I'm worried that you're gonna judge me and you're gonna be this terrible thing,
yeah.
right? Yeah, careful because
Hmm.
that can be really prescriptive and people can get hurt by that because you think so lowly of them. That doesn't build trust. So you got to be smart in how you do the story I'm telling myself is.
Yeah.
Yeah.
But think about what's going to happen anyway. You can do one of these two things, and if you don't do one, the other will happen. You can tell the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth from the get-go. And you can be vulnerable and you can share your fear and you can talk about all those things in an environment where nothing has yet happened and everybody can be aware
Mhm.
and maybe even helpful. Or you can be dishonest with lies of omission
Mhm.
or other kinds of lies, which I think a lot of us like to say they're little white lies, right? And they turn into a little bit darker and darker and darker, and there's
Uh-huh.
just no white in them anymore. Okay.
Right. Yeah.
Um, but if you don't have that conversation up front to share your insecurity and your fear and your doubt or other things, then you're going to have a conversation later that says, the reason I did this is because I have these fears and insecurities and doubts. And I was so afraid
Hmm.
to say something to you because you'd think less of me or you'd be hurt or whatever the case may be. But by then, so much damage is done.
Right.
It's a different conversation.
Hmm. Yeah, for
Right.
sure.
Same subject matter, completely different way that it's going to be taken. So it's best to be upfront,
Yeah, I agree.
upfront.
For
Right.
sure. Yeah.
So the second one that we wanted to chat about a little bit was knowing, I'm gonna not be realistic with my spouse because something similar has happened before,
Hmm.
and I don't want that to happen again.
Yeah.
You know, the first thing that comes to my mind, and I don't know why, is the spouse is on the other side of this going, and you're presuming that I'm not aware of what I did or how I reacted before. And you're presuming that I'm not aware that maybe my reaction wasn't the best thing for the situation. And you're presuming that I'm not aware that maybe I should have learned something from that. You're presuming a lot.
Hmm. That's fair.
And again, you're taking your spouse out of the equation of being a part of in I'm trying to remember the words, they just escaped me, in sickness and in health.
Hmm.
And they're said so many different ways anymore. I don't even remember all the ways, but in sickness and health, in good times and in bad, in happy times and sad, whatever the pastor of the day is who's performing that wedding. You're eliminating the other half of this relationship from being a part of those things.
Hmm.
And remember, we don't grow in relationships nearly as much from things that go perfectly well
Yeah.
as much as we do from things that don't go well at all.
Hmm.
But that's where we show our mettle and we show our willingness to bond together, even if there's things to be accountable for. All right, if we're going to get through this, we're going to do it together.
I've had a couple of clients years ago that had shopping addiction, and they'd have a fight with their husband and they'd go shopping to, deal with whatever those negative emotions are.
Mm.
And they wouldn't tell him. They had separate credit cards that they'd applied for. One of them got into pretty serious trouble with debt, um, like over $50,000.
Ow.
Hmm. Yeah. And I asked her, and she coincidentally, she was also struggling with anxiety. Um, go figure. Hello. Yeah, it's like, yeah, what do you make of that? She's like, well, I can pay it off if I just get another job. I'm like, he's gonna notice. Like, he's not that stupid. Like, yeah. But we create those holes for ourselves. We literally believe these things, like you really believe. And of course it blew up later, you
Oh,
know.
yeah.
Yeah. But part of
That's
the
the
reason,
conversation is the same later. It's just much more uncomfortable.
yeah. And the reason she didn't want to tell him was because she'd blown up one of their credit cards, 5 years before or whatever. And
Hmm.
he took it away from her and cut it up. And she knew how he was going to react, right?
Yeah,
She, quote, knew. Um, yeah, interesting. Our human behavior is just, we're so messy.
we are.
Yeah.
I know of a, and I'm sorry that it's the ladies that are the examples of this topic right now, but uh, that would get in a riff or a tiff with her husband, and she loved her dresses, clothes, and so when that would happen, she would go out and buy something expensive to wear,
Hmm.
and she would bring it home tucked in between other items that came back from the laundry.
Oh,
On a hanger under the
oh
plastic.
my
She had
gosh.
carefully placed it in the middle, so that if there's no, but and
Oh.
that's rough. But what's behind it, I think, is the what we're focusing on. Why does somebody feel the need to uh you know to mess things up on purpose? I'm trying to find a better way to say it, but to go and do something that they know
Hmm.
is going to only make whatever situation is not good already even worse.
Yeah.
And is it an I'll show you? Is it a see I can too? Is it a I don't really always know what's going on behind the scenes in those situations. But um, we do have a past and we do have a track record and we do have memories of those things.
Hmm.
And so, although it is not difficult to understand why someone would want to withhold truths because of previous experiences, again, the answer is the same. You can handle it now at whatever level it is,
Yep.
or you can
Pay me
handle it
now.
later when it's a lot more intense than it is now.
Yeah. My dad used to say, pay me now or pay me later.
That's right.
Later is going to be more with
That was
interest.
the Fram oil filter man too on
Oh, okay.
television on the commercials. You can pay
Okay.
me now with for an oil filter,
Yeah.
or you can pay me later for a rebuilt engine.
Yep. Yep. Okay.
And he didn't even have to say those words. He just said, "Pay me now or pay me later." Just pointed
Oof.
his finger, and that's the
Hmm.
way it was. I don't know
Hmm.
why I can remember that, but I struggle to remember the names of my children and grandchildren. So, but
and that makes me think of something about aging. Um, And just as an aside, I've done the thing I've done three other times. I've thought my husband turns his birthday's in January, and he's supposed to be a year older than me, except for like 5 months where he's a year and 5 months older than me, or 4 months. And I always mess it up in January, and I think, oh well, he's this age, so that makes me this age. So I've spent the last couple of months thinking I'm a year older than I am, and I get mad at myself every time I do it. I'm not 57. I'm actually 56. And I haven't known that. Anyway, it's not the first time I've done that. But my point about aging, sorry, just acting like a girl there for a moment. Doing the side rail trail. But the thing about aging is that people do change over time. Um, I see that in my own life and in most of my clients, the couples that I work with, when two people are following Jesus Christ, he's in the transformation business. So we can't honestly know how it's going to go because that is saying God's grace is not sufficient, that he is not doing what he does
Mhm.
for all of us. So there's that.
Yeah, it's saying what God has to offer to this situation is not powerful enough.
Hmm.
It's not good enough.
Yeah.
And I think what we're looking for, though, if we want to be realistic about it, is we're looking for a way out without consequences. If God is all that powerful that he can get me out of this and I won't
Uh-huh.
feel a thing.
Uh,
And that is unrealistic.
mhm.
So the realistic aspect of those things is that God's ways are always better than ours. And the ways that he would go about healing a heart and fixing a situation that makes it workable and acceptable for everybody involved. Um, why can't we get that across our minds? That every time I've taken it into my own hands and tried to scheme one way or the other to make things work out, it just usually ends up worse.
Yeah. I'm thinking of the garden. Did God really say? Yeah. There we go again.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So what were you taught as a young lady growing up about what not to do to upset a man that is your husband?
Nobody told me anything, to be honest.
Really?
Yeah. Yeah, that was just not a thing. But what's also true is I've been working ever since I was, well, getting paid since I was 13.
Hmm.
But I'd work for my dad on the weekends ever since I was like 3 or 4 years old. I'd be out at the radio station. And I was in a business environment, and he was really clear out of the gate. When you're here, I'm not your dad, I'm your boss. So that
13?
means, yeah, no
Well, that's
crying.
that terrible media trafficking going on there.
Well, in the state of Montana back then, if you were the child of a business owner, the wage and hour laws didn't apply exactly the same. They had whatever it is for that. But I do remember being in church because I didn't grow up Christian, but we took this marriage class. And I remember sitting there and the pastor was saying, and the wife must respect her husband. And the hair on the back of my neck stood up, and I was instantly furious because uh, I thought respect should be earned. So I didn't have a clue.
Mm,
Yeah. And I didn't know what I didn't know about that. And it was pretty messy. Um, and I've worked with some clients and I've seen some people say, well, I can't tell him that. I can't say that. He'll get upset. And men say that about their wives too, right?
oh,
Why can't,
yes.
yeah, like
Oh,
I think it
yes.
goes both ways. The volcano erupts on either side of the
I
gender.
don't know that there's any differentiation in this one.
Yeah. And yeah, so I don't think women are taught how to navigate that well. I had a really cool experience recently. My husband was really mad about something and he was just lit about it. And I did the same thing my mom did with my dad, right? Just sat there, listened to him, and I was like, yeah, let's break stuff, man. Of course you feel this. I'm just validating all of it. And he's like, you're being really nice. I'm like, it's okay. You should be mad about this. Like, it's all good. He's like, you're not upset. I'm like, nope, keep going. And I think at one point I said, do you want me to hold this person down and you can slap the tar out of him? And he's like, and he coughed. He's like, what?
What did you
Like,
just say?
yeah, I'm the least violent person on the planet. So I don't think I had a lot of training in that space, but I've seen that play out big time. And people are walking on eggshells so that they don't upset the other person. I can't do this because,
Right.
and then they lie.
I remember when my parents were young and still learning, still finding their way. Uh, that there a few occasions when my mother would get upset with my dad and it would get somewhat animated. And um, none of my parents were violent or abusive, but they got upset
Hmm.
and they didn't always know the best way to handle their upsetness.
Hmm.
And my mother would sometimes, we're just going to say, fly off the handle a little. And I remember two or three times walking out of the house and seeing my dad maybe just sitting in a lawn chair out in the backyard, looking off into space. And I remember once or twice I walked up and patted him on the shoulder and he just shook his head. He says, "Don't ever upset your wife, son. Don't ever
No.
upset your wife." you know,
Oh.
but we take that to heart. We do. We see those things and and then when we see the possibility that we're about to upset our wife,
Mm-hmm.
maybe for the first time, maybe not for the first time, we begin this devious process in our
Hmm.
brain about,
Hmm.
okay, what's done is done. How can I keep it from upsetting her?
Hmm.
And usually the only way to do that is to hide something, to lie about something,
Yeah.
or to paint it in a way that isn't accurate, which I guess essentially is a lie as well.
So can I add one?
Oh, by all means.
Yeah. So I'm not recommending this strategy, by the way.
Disclaimer.
Yeah. So I got a speeding ticket driving this is 20 years ago. I was driving my husband's BMW. I'd never been in a car like that. And I just drove it to pick my kids up from a friend's house. And I got pulled over for going 65 and a 40. And I didn't have a clue I was going that fast, right? Because it feels different. And I tried to talk the officer out of a ticket and it didn't happen. So I get home and I said, so, um, I took your car. And he folds his newspaper down. He looks at me. He goes, "What's wrong with my car?" And I said, your car's fine. But you remember that time you drove into the front of the UDF with the Subaru and the insurance company called me and wanted to know what happened and why we didn't tell them? And I defended your honor and insisted it didn't happen, but it actually did. He goes, "What'd you do to my car?" I said, "Well, your car's fine, but I just got a speeding ticket." And he's like, "How much is this going to cost me?" And I said, $115. And he says, "All right." And that was it. That
But
was
you
it.
painted him into that corner before
I
he had a
did.
chance to get out.
It was masterful. But I literally did think of all the times that I had his back. And I was
Yeah.
like, okay, I've screwed up. Let me just remind you of the times when I was kind.
Hmm.
And I look back on that. It's like, it's kind of funny, right? And I was playing with it, but there's people that actually do that. And maybe my heart wasn't pure with it, but I really didn't want to get in trouble. But I also knew I
No,
needed to tell him, So, you have to navigate that stuff. And I think the truth is the best way. Now, I had a little creative way of doing that. Um, and I don't think it's useful to remind your spouse of the mistakes they've made in the past. Um,
not typically.
Not typically, no. Um, so I think if I'd have been older, more mature, I think I would have said, okay, so this happened and I'm really sorry, and just poof, let it go. But yeah, so that's a creative thing to not emulate right there.
Yep.
It makes a great story though, doesn't it?
It does. I think that's one that needs to be bronzed.
Well, let's land this plane, Kyle. We've been talking about reasons we can't be realistic with our spouse, and we've talked about we don't want to disappoint them. We don't want to disappoint them. We know how they're going to react, and they've taught us, or we've been taught, the culture's taught us, our parents taught us, somebody taught us that you can't upset your spouse. Is there anything more you want to add around that last one, or you want to land the plane here?
Sure. And just the simple fact to go against the movie line, they can handle the truth.
Mm-hmm.
They can. And to be straightforward and be accountable, even if what you did was devious and now telling the truth about it is going to reveal that deviousness.
Mm-hmm.
Um, the movie line is, you can't handle the truth, but they
Mm-hmm.
can. They can. And they may not like it. And it may take a minute for people to speak in ways that are going to be productive.
Yep.
So we'll pause on purpose is not a
Yeah.
bad idea.
Yeah.
But yeah, just developing the habit so that you have the reputation with your spouse of being truthful,
Yeah.
so that when something bigger comes along and your reputation is that you've been truthful, so they may still want to know details and find out what happened in a particular situation, but they believe that if that's what you tell them, that's what happened.
Hmm.
And we move through it.
Yeah.
Because if there's even the smallest shred of doubt about, I don't think you're telling the truth, I don't trust you,
Hmm.
then seeds are going to be planted that are going to one day bloom. And that's not a good thing. They're not edible vegetables.
Well, and we flash those little micro expressions so they know something's off.
Mhm.
So it's not useful. And then on top of that, I think people misconstrue love protects, right? From love versus
Yeah.
love protects into, well, I'm not going to hurt their feelings. So I'm going to protect them from this thing. It's like, you know what? You're not protecting them. You're making them more sensitive by not letting them deal with reality, which
Hmm.
is kind of what we were talking about at the beginning. Being
Yeah.
realistic, reality is based on being realistic. Like that's it.
Well,
So
and you're going to be nice or you're going to be kind,
exactly.
because protecting somebody from something may feel like it's being nice to them,
Hmm.
but ultimately it's one of the most unkind things you could do to yourself, to them, to the relationship.
Yeah, good point. Well, this is always a joy. And you always bring some interesting perspectives. And I want to point out with this episode, I think there's a lot of evidence of the differences between male and female brains because I noticed today I'm actually getting sleep again with the puppy, but for some reason I'm more tired now that I'm getting sleep again. I don't know what that is, like some rebound thing. And so my brain's all over the place, and women do that. And I liked how you just kind of organized this right out of the gate again. And you just kind of kept us on task and we're very direct with all that. So I appreciate that. Love how your mind works. Love podcasting with you. And
Likewise.
to our listeners, there's a lot here. And if you're in Texas, I want to encourage you to seek out Kyle. You can go to headway.co/providers/Kyle dash Hargrove, just like it sounds, Hargrove. And you can check out, is there a .com on that or is it just, yeah, it's just that.
Mhm.
So yeah, you can check him out. If you're in Texas, you can go see him. Like, oh, well, it'll probably be over Zoom, right? Because that's a big
Virtual,
state.
yes.
Yeah,
Yeah.
pretty big state there. But for the rest of you, be sure to, pop over to our website, greaterimpactcouples.org, and grab the free resources. And be sure to check out our next episode. If you're dealing with conflict in your life, this will help. We'll see you soon.